Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, RB Laws, and this is my co-host.
Wells.
We appreciate all the support on our recent content. And we do have a comment on our short centered around Klay Thompson from at TreyWave4146 on YouTube. He said exactly what I said. Would you just let Klay walk like that? SMH shaking my head. If anything, you just made a championship contender even stronger in your own conference, and there ain't no way Dallas ain't starting Klay. Yeah, I mean, that is a factor, but at the end of the day, I think Dallas was the ultimate move that they possibly could have pulled off. Like, you know, a lot of teams didn't have a lot of leeway in this, and, you know, at the end of the day, they got rid of the salary. They didn't take on any salary, so I think that's what the Warriors' goal was there. And obviously, they wanted to do right by Klay by sending him to a team that, you know, actually has a chance at a title next year.
Yeah, they did a sign and trade, and they didn't take back anything because basically they let him walk in order to bring in like DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield. I think actually that ended up being a 6-team trade, the first 6-team trade in NBA history, right? Yeah. Again, like Klay, Buddy, Kyle Anderson. Obviously Dallas was involved in there as well, and I think Denver was in there. I don't remember for what reason though.
Yeah. So we appreciate that comment a lot. Before we do get started, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the podcast for more content and updates.
So over the weekend, we had a pretty big free agency signing occur. You had DeMar Derozan go to Sacramento for a 3-year, $74 million deal. It was a sign and trade. Not one that I would have expected. Obviously, like as it was building up, right, there were reports of him going to Sacramento, right, meeting with Kings brass basically to kind of determine what to do and where to go. We also had a trade that occurred before that where it was Devontae Graham for the Spurs being dumped to the Charlotte Hornets, right, in order to open up cap space, which you could kind of assume was for the Spurs to be able to take a player back. So 3 teams were involved. Kings got DeMar DeRozan. Spurs got Harrison Barnes, right? So Harrison Barnes goes from the Kings to the Spurs. And the Chicago Bulls, what did they get back for DeMar DeRozan? Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks. So not an ideal return if you're the Bulls. Obviously, given his age, I guess, you know, you weren't necessarily going to get like a ton back for him. It's just if you're the Bulls, it's just kind of rough because, you know, letting him just walk as opposed to getting even like something relatively minor back for him is just kind of rough, right? Like say for the Bulls, like you traded Caruso and you got back Josh Giddey, which we didn't have a problem with. It would have been nice to have gotten a pick. But say like DeRozan, he's a good player. So not being able to get anything other than that is just kind of tough. But obviously for the Bulls, they're going to bottom out anyways, right? Which ultimately they're doing what we said that they should have done anyways, where you need to let some of these guys go. Either the free agents, you let them walk, or the guys that you can still trade them. So that way you can get, you know, a top draft pick for, you know, next year's draft, which is supposed to be really, really good, right? Obviously, there's a lot of big guys that could be some major game changers in that draft.
Yeah. You know, for me, honestly, like, you can't argue that this isn't, you know, a talent upgrade because you look at who the Kings had at that position prior to, you know, acquiring DeMar DeRozan. It's a direct upgrade from Harrison Barnes and whoever else would have been playing the wing alongside him. So I think it's a W for the Kings in that aspect. I think, you know, it just raises more questions about the fit and how you feel about that because now you lose out, I think, on a little bit of perimeter shooting, I guess, you know, in some size. I think Harrison Barnes is a little bit taller than DeRozan, but yeah, and DeRozan is very hesitant on the 3-point shot. We know that. So adding that alongside Fox is kind of skeptical alongside Sabonis as well. But at the end of the day, I think it's a W for them because they were able to upgrade. Every other team, I think, that was involved, I mean, it's okay. I think for the Spurs, you get you know, a wing and, you know, they're not really trying to win. I hope not right now. And same with the Bulls, you know, they're kickstarting their rebuild. That's the first domino to fall. I think, you know, hopefully we'll be seeing Zach LaVine be moved or something later on. But yeah, I mean, you can't really hate on this, I think, from any real perspective, if that makes any sense.
I mean, again, from the Kings' perspective, you got a player upgrade that's, you know, like DeMar DeRozan's a better player than Harrison Barnes,
That's my
right? I
point.
mean,
Yeah.
he already was, right? And,
Yep.
and still is
Yes.
at this point, despite his age. Again, for DeRozan also, because there were talks about, would he go somewhere else? Like, would he go to Miami? Would he go to LA? Either Lakers or Clippers. But for the Kings, like, because it's a sign and trade, you got more money than you would have probably expected. I think for the first 2 seasons, right, he gets $30 million a year.
Yeah, it's
So,
pretty dope.
most of the money is within the first couple of seasons, which it's a lot. But, if you're the Kings, you'd probably rather have DeRozan than Barnes. But like you said, it is a different type of fit because he's not, he's more of an on-ball guy than Harrison Barnes, right?
Yes.
And he's also not as good of a three-point shooter, even though he does shoot well from three in the corners, and he's, I guess, a little more comfortable taking threes than he used to be.
Yes.
But still not a guy that you're really dependent on for, three-point shooting. But, for the Kings, like, you had some nice moves in the offseason because, you got in DeRozan. You were able to keep Malik Monk. You were able to re-sign him at an amount that I think most people felt like, he was going to go for more, right? And then obviously in the draft, you got Devin Carter, who unfortunately today, or if you're watching this on Monday, yesterday, right, he's going to be out for a while with a shoulder surgery, so he's going to miss some time. It's supposed to be the same type of surgery that Herter got, right? So, they don't know whether or not he'll begin the season. But, again, he's not quite as key to your success as some of the other guys. Like, you need your main guys healthy. And there could be more moves on the way because there's been talks about maybe they might be interested in making a deal to bring in, another forward, like, say, like a Kuzma, or other guys like that. But, again, like, the Kings, like, it should be a better team. It's just, again, the question for DeRozan is, does he have any level of slippage, right? And then, the main thing is for the Kings, their offense wasn't as good last year because 2 seasons ago, right, they were the best offense in the NBA, right? But they were not very good on the defensive end. But last season, they took a step back on offense, even though their defense got better. So hopefully, you would hope that the defense doesn't take a huge hit with DeRozan instead of Barnes, which it shouldn't, I guess, because Barnes has not been as good defensively in recent seasons as he was, in previous seasons. And then obviously DeRozan's a much better offensive player than Barnes at this point, right? So that's where I think if you're the Kings, you should feel good about this move. Does it push them into a contender status? Probably not. But, it's another team in the Western Conference that's clearly going to try to win games and be competitive. So for any other team in the Western Conference, right, it's still another team that you can't just play 4 times and then roll over. Like it's going to be a team that's going to be, that's going to be able to beat a lot of teams on any given night.
Yeah, and I think they'll be better offensively. Now you're compiling 3 all-stars, and this is kind of what we wanted them to do in terms of making a move to get a third piece, a third guy. So I think it doesn't necessarily, like you said, put them in contention for me, but I think it does make me feel better about them going into this next season, especially after the last season that they had. So, like you said, they'll be better. And you're also probably hoping that Keegan Murray takes not necessarily a leap, but gets better. Right. So, I think the starting 5 is going to be legit for this squad.
Exactly. I think that's how you have to look at it. It makes the team better. It's an improvement. How much of an improvement is it? We'll have to see.
Right.
But at the very least, like you said, it makes you feel better about what the Kings have been able to do this offseason because they had a good draft, and so far they've had a good offseason in terms of like free agency and trades.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we had some other deals occur over the course of the weekend as well, right? You had a few. You had Caleb Martin from the Miami Heat, right? He left the Heat and went to the Philadelphia 76ers, right, for a 4-year, $32 million deal. They had to waive Paul Reed in order to make the signing work. But, obviously you brought in Drummond, so you're not really upset about losing Paul Reed once you brought in Drummond, who at this point is a better player and also like a guy that can slide in easier when Embiid is out, as a guy that can still produce at the center spot in a lesser role than he used to be. So, for Philly, like you've had a pretty good offseason, right? Because you brought in Paul George, right? You brought back Kelly Oubre, right? You brought Drummond in, you brought Caleb Martin in and Eric Gordon. So they've had, pretty quality, offseason. So now you're starting to feel better about this Philly team than you would have, like maybe a few months ago, right? Because I remember when we talked about, the Philly trade between Harden, and, the other stuff for the Clippers, right? And at the time, we liked the deal more for Philly because we thought that it gave them more flexibility because, even though you're not getting back the most talented player, like you'll have the flexibility to either make a deal at the deadline or just make a push in the offseason. We thought they should focus more on the offseason, even though we were pretty skeptical that they could sign anybody, right? Like we didn't expect really any major player to go to Philly, but you got one. You got one in Paul George, and you were able to get other guys as well. So, their starting five seems like it's pretty much set, right? Like you're probably going to have, like Maxey, Oubre, George, Martin, and Embiid, right?
Yeah.
And then off the bench, you'll have Drummond, you'll have Eric Gordon, and, whatever else they can kind of scrape in as well, right? Presumably Lowry will be back. So like you got a good squad, ultimately, like in terms of like Daryl Morey has done a good job of putting this group together.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think one thing that they're banking on is Tyrese Maxey being, insane next season and continuing on his campaign from last year. And yeah, they did everything that I think they were supposed to do in terms of, with the things that they had in front of them with all that cap. You brought in additions, upgrades, and you got the best free agent out there in terms of a guy who was looking to leave teams and switch teams. So shout out to Philly for acquiring Paul George, and then obviously the other guys complimenting them. I think it's like you said. I think they're guys in theory who should be good fits. It's not anything that makes you scratch your head and you're like, what the heck? These are quality guys, and some of them you got, I think, for a pretty good price. So yeah, shout out to Philly.
Yeah, exactly. So they got a good squad over there. It's just it's a matter of, like you mentioned, Tyrese Maxey taking a leap. I think again the main hope for Philly is that with George and also an improved Maxey, that should help lower the load for Embiid, especially in the regular season, and then hopefully he can be more fresh by the time the postseason comes around. And then, you're not quite as reliant on him being completely superhuman in order to, be able to make a deep push. Obviously we'll have to see, what it looks like in reality, because on paper, right, it's obviously looks really, really good. But, we'll still have to see. But it's still like a really good offseason because ultimately, like, you had to do this and you did it. So, this is a better roster, on paper than the one from last season for sure.
Yeah, and that's all that matters is about, the playoffs. Right. Get to the playoffs, perform in the playoffs as well, because I think that's kind of the one question that everybody has about Philly. We already know awesome regular season team, box office stuff. Come playoffs, they haven't really done anything, proven anything. So I think this year might be their year that they might do something. Right. We'll see, though.
Yeah, and then from the Heat's perspective, they haven't, really done much in free agency at all.
Very
right?
true.
I think they brought in Alec Burks, right? And then obviously they drafted Khalil Ware, right? But outside of that, they haven't really done much of anything, right? They've kind of struck out on some guys. Obviously, it seems like they're not trading Jimmy Butler. So, like what's the next step for them, right? Is this kind of like a concession of like this group may just kind of just be a little bit cooked? Is there possibly some other trade that we don't know about waiting in the wings, or what's the next move for them? Because it's kind of hard to tell like how they view their team. I know there was a report about Riley thinks that they can still contend. They just need to be healthy. But, of course, I mean, what is he going to say? I mean, like, not that, because obviously, like, we know that, he doesn't necessarily have a filter, but still.
I mean, like, to me, that roster, the way it's currently constructed, it gives me the vibes of a playoff team, not necessarily a contender, though. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they get in the playoffs as like an 8th seed. 7, maybe even like 6 if you really want to give them the clear benefit of the doubt. But I don't know. I'm not too high on them. I think their hands are kind of tied. They're, one of those teams like you were talking about where they haven't really done much. They've kind of been sitting on their hands. And I think we liked what they did in the draft. And, we weren't like talking bad about that at all. Because I think it's like one of the first kind of signals and moves that we've seen where they're kind of gearing the roster maybe a little bit more towards Bam than Jimmy, where they're kind of prioritizing Bam's growth and what he's going to be able to do later on in his career, playing alongside another big man who complements his game well. But in regards to Jimmy, I think that they're making a mistake. I think they should trade him. At least get something of significant value back for him, because I feel like he does have a decent amount of value. It's just like, I don't know, the ceiling of that team is just rough. I think considering that you have Tyler Hero on the team as well, who seems to be very injury prone alongside Jimmy Butler, who cannot stay healthy as well. So I get what Pat Riley's saying about the health thing. Yeah, like I think they would be a good team if they were healthy, but I wouldn't say like yeah, they have a legitimate shot at winning the NBA Finals if that team is healthy as currently
Right.
constructed. No shot.
Yeah, yeah, like essentially kind of a similar position as last season,
Yep,
right? Where it's just
exactly.
like, could they be a spoiler? Could they be a team that wins around? Yeah, sure. But could they be a team that can, win it all? Probably not.
No, not right now.
Yeah. Some other deals, right, that occurred, right? Miles Bridges re-signed with the Charlotte Hornets, 3 years, 75 million. I think both you and I thought he was probably going to return to Charlotte, right? So
Yep.
obviously, now he is, right? So obviously, if you're the Hornets, right, interesting few months, right? Where obviously, early last season, right, Jordan's out as the majority owner, right? Still a minority owner, right, but no longer the main owner of the team. And then, after that, right, coaches replaced, right, with Charles Lee, right, who was a Boston assistant, right? They brought in a new GM, and then obviously they drafted, Salon, right? So pretty good, in terms of like just overall, like a lot of the moves that they've done, like it just feels like a lot of these things make more sense, right? Obviously, he's got some off the court stuff, which we, already know about and we've talked about previously. But, if you're the Hornets, like obviously, like they weren't going to get any free agents. So the main thing was like clearly they're using their cap space as kind of like just a dumping ground, to bring in, expirings or whatever bad contracts, right? Because like they had Graham, they had Jackson, right? But either way, like you just kind of hope if you're the Hornets, like you have a decent mix of young players. It's just, can they actually be healthy, and then can they actually click? Can you actually get some guys that are defensive oriented players in there as well? Because we know they have some good offensive talent, but it feels like they could be a little more respectable, right? Like, even though we thought that was going to happen last season, it didn't. But, the health was also a big factor too. But now it feels like a lot of the moves that they're making feel like it's more of an organization that's found a clear direction to go in that makes a lot more sense and hopefully is more stable. Even though, again, you brought in a guy that's got a pretty controversial background.
100%. I think it's a good move though because he's young. On the court, he's very underrated, I think, in what he's able to bring. I think he's a great fit alongside LaMelo. Can easily also be a great fit alongside Brandon Miller as well. So I think you have to like and tip your hat to what Charlotte has been able to build. I think they have all the kind of building blocks and pieces to be successful. It's just a matter of, like you said, development, leaps, steps forward, things of that nature. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what Charlotte looks like, in the next couple of years, honestly, because I think they have what it takes to be, one of those young and hungry teams. It's just a matter of, like you said, being serious and, locking in as a unit. And I think this is a good, contract and definitely, a great move from Charlotte.
Yeah. And then, minor one, Simone Fontecchio going back to Detroit. We don't really have to spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
But it is a guy that, can shoot, played well for the Pistons, and they also brought in Malik Beasley. So now you've brought in some guys, that are reputable NBA shooters, which is kind of what you needed, to put around a lot of these other guys because, their main core young guys, not a lot of them are really known for their outside shooting. So this should help. I mean, we thought they had a good offseason last year and they ended up being horrible, but, these have been, pretty solid signings, I think, from Detroit.
Yeah, and it's like with Detroit, I think what they're doing is, and we see this with all kinds of teams where, I think they're just trying to build a sense of identity. That doesn't mean these guys are going to be sticking around for like, a long time. Like Malik Beasley and Simone Fontecchio are probably not, your franchise shooters, you know what I mean? But I think building the sense of identity, getting these guys comfortable with some knockdown shooters is great because, say you do get your franchise, shooters and stuff like that, then, hey, Detroit might actually be looking legit because these guys have had the experience playing with, some guys that are pretty high caliber shooters. So like you said, solid quality shooters to bring in. And then also, I think we're not necessarily expecting Detroit to take a leap, but we're expecting them to win more games than they did last year.
Right. Yeah. And then Dario Saric, right? 2-year deal going to the Denver Nuggets, right? Obviously, he was on the Warriors last year. Played a lot for them early on, but then just was exiled from the rotation.
Yeah.
About midway through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously they were trying to get Trace Jackson Davis some more minutes. So, kind of weird because, obviously, like, he's a good player. It just feels like, ideally, if you wanted a backup center for Denver, I think it would be a little bit more nice to have, like, a more natural, like, rim protecting, rebounding big. But, at the very least, he should be able to play in some two big lineups. Like, you could have him next to Gordon, and then like you can still have a front court that's not super small, that still has some size in there. And again, he can play, like, which again, like that just gives Denver more depth. So it's like you lost KCP, which makes your starting five worse. But best case scenario, like maybe you can kind of upgrade the second unit so that way the loss doesn't hurt quite as bad as it would if you just didn't do anything. So, fine signing, but again, I would have liked a more of a defensive oriented guy, but it's still like there's not too many players you could have done better than.
Yeah, it's not like a game changing signing in my opinion, but I think it will make a small difference, like you said, in terms of the backup unit. Because my thing is the guy going to play when it comes to playoffs? That would be my one question. What does he look like when they do get to that point, if they do get to that point? And yeah, that would be my one concern. But I think what he's able to do with the ball and without the ball, I think it will bring some value to what Denver does as well, because maybe I don't know what they're looking at in terms of Russell Westbrook, bringing him in, because if they bring in Russ alongside Saric, hey, then I mean your bench got a lot better than it was last year.
Right. Yeah, and then presumably a lot of people think that they'll find a way to add Westbrook, whether or not it's some type of trade or maybe he gets bought out.
Right.
But if you can get him and you can get Shards, like that's solid, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously you lost KCP, which is a big loss, but at the very least, like it gives you a better bench. It's just again, KCP was such a good fit that it still hurts. But
yeah, he was necessary for like their whole identity. He was literally a part of their starting five, like you said. So like I don't think there's any way that you can really replicate that unless
right.
Even then, I don't know. Like, there's no way that you could trade for a guy of his caliber. Definitely didn't draft anybody that was of his caliber, but you're making your bench stronger. So hopefully that eases the bleeding a little bit.
Yeah. And then finally, LeBron finally signed his 2-year max deal, right? It ended up being 2 years, $101 million as opposed to the 2 years, 104, right? So it's still got a player option. It's got a trade kicker. Right. And obviously, him taking a little less than the max. Right. I guess that's kind of a key piece because it puts the Lakers below the second apron, which gives them more flexibility to do something relative to what they could have done if he had just signed the max. I think they're $45,000 below the second apron, which is absolutely nuts.
Yeah,
but
that's crazy.
That $45,000 makes all the difference, right? Because obviously we know when you're in the second apron, there's a lot of things that you cannot do. You can't stack contracts together, right? You can't take back, less than what you send out, which you already can't do when you're in the first apron, right? Obviously, I think you can't send out picks like ways in advance, right? So that would kind of mean like picks from like 2031 and onwards you can't send out. So it's pretty bad, right? So obviously, like that helps. It also, I believe, gives them the ability to use the taxpayer mid-level exception, right? Which is the smaller one that's like a little over $5 million. That would allow you to maybe sign somebody that is better than a minimum contract player. But the problem still is you have 15 roster spots, including 3 minimum contracts, and 2 of those 3 they probably want to get rid of. And, in order to get rid of those spots, you're going to probably have to give up some type of compensation like draft picks. Ideally, I think if you were to do something like that, you would want to kind of combine them in a trade with one of the bigger contract guys, maybe. And then that way you can open up the roster spots, right? People have talked about like a Gary Trent Jr. or Spencer Dinwiddie that's been, who was already on the team, but he would be a guy that would come back. So, it helps, right? Obviously taking the pay cut is nice because again, like he was supposed to take a bigger one, but they weren't able to land anything. But he still gave them a pay cut to be able to still allow for some more flexibility.
Yeah, this was a methodical move, like you said. So shout out to Bron, for giving them this leeway, a little bit of leeway, because the Lakers.
And you probably wouldn't do it like if there wasn't at least something, because otherwise you would just. Well, I mean, like obviously it would make it harder, but it's like I wouldn't care.
Right, and it's like the Lakers are one of those teams that hasn't really done much in terms of free agency. Obviously, retaining LeBron James is a big deal and a big accomplishment, but what have they done to improve the roster per se outside of, their draft picks? Nothing. So I think something is on the way. They're cooking something potentially. And this is kind of just the first domino to fall in the lead up and the hype to whoever they sign. I'm curious who it is, but I think the names that you mentioned are solid, but preferably big man, but there's not a
Right.
lot of big men out there. So
Right.
boo-hoo, I guess. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. They're working with what they've got. And
Right.
yeah, shout out to Braun for giving them that leeway once again.
Yeah, because the three minimum contracts you have, basically, it's like Reddish, Wood, Hayes, right? And
Right.
sounds like the one that they like the most is Jackson Hayes, which I guess kind of makes sense,
Yeah.
from a perspective. Yeah, just because like it seems like in terms of what he does, like they like that type of stuff, right? Because he's athletic, and plays hard. Whereas like with Reddish, like he was good early in the season, but then he missed a lot of time because of injury, and you don't really need him now, right? Because like
Right.
you brought in Max Christie, presumably he's gonna play. You don't really need Reddish if you have Max Christie.
Yeah.
So that make and then like with Wood, well, if you don't like as much what Wood does, then you don't really need both him and Jackson Hayes. You might as well parlay that into like a better player. So, but again, in order to move those guys, you're gonna have to give up something because nobody's gonna just necessarily take those contracts on for free. And I don't even think you can necessarily stack minimums anyway. So it would have to be like in a bigger trade where, as we've talked about, right, guys like a Jeremy Grant, Kyle Kuzma, Cam Johnson / Dorian Finney-Smith, or maybe somebody else that we don't know about. But I don't know. It's just kind of a weird situation because again, like you said, and as we've said before, they've done very little, actually basically nothing, right? Other than like you said, draft and then re-sign guys that they already had. A couple of guys, Prince walked, but other than that, like they haven't really had an active free agency at all.
Yeah.
So,
I'm curious what they do because I think their biggest concern should be addressing, that backup big man spot. And you're looking at the candidates like now it's what Paul Reed. You got
like nothing's really left at this
Tice. Like yikes, man, it's bad, man.
point. Right.
It's
Nothing. Yeah, nothing's really left.
Yeah. So I think their next option is like you said, trade.
Yeah. So obviously free agency goes on, right? So there's still some guys left on the board, and obviously we'll continue to discuss those and talk about those. Presumably some of those guys will probably be snagged up by the time we have our next episode out. But, now we have Summer League, right? The California Classic has, gone underway. It's already gone through a couple of days, right? We had the Lakers, the Kings, Heat, Warriors, and others play as well, right? Obviously, like, there's not really a whole lot really to take away from the California Classics, right? Because, like, the rosters are not even the rosters you normally see in Vegas, and it's also, like, the rosters that you won't see during the regular season. So, for certain types of players, it's rough. Like, if you're a center in the Summer League, I feel really bad for you just because of the fact that, like, you're not getting the ball in any favorable spots. You're probably not touching the ball that much, period. Like, when we went to Vegas and we saw Wemby, right? Like, it was clearly, like, there were a lot of guys that were not all that interested in feeding the ball to them. So, like I said, if you're a center, I feel bad for you. If you're, like, a guy that kind of plays off of other guys better, right? That's not a center. Like, if you're, like, an off guard or, like, a, non-primary ball handler, I also feel bad for you because, again, nobody's setting you up. So, he had, Khalil Ware, I guess, in his, summer league day, in his summer league games played very well. Again, I don't really want to take away a whole lot from the summer league. We liked the pick, obviously, because of what he can do, as like a modern day NBA big, right? So that was cool. Bronny played as well. Didn't have as good of a debut, obviously. But, and then I think he also got hurt as well.
Yeah, he missed the second game.
Yeah, he missed
injury.
the second game. He's supposed to come back the next game. But again, it's like, it's hard to have some takeaways. Like, the Hornets played a Chinese basketball team. And so it's like,
Yeah.
and that's nothing against like the Chinese basketball team at all. It's just like, I don't have any takeaways from, what we see from a lot of these groups. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not really a fair sample size. Like you said, they're not really playing in a NBA system. It's more of an exhibition where it's like,
right,
prove to me that you got it like that, or whatever the case may be. We all have seen Summer League. We know how it operates. Yeah. But yeah, shout out to Khalil Ware because that guy had a great game too. He had like 26 points, 11 rebounds. But at the same time, like, and that's not to this isn't to discredit him, but this is kind of to show you that you can't really go based off of how a guy looks in Summer League because Cole Swider, he also had 21 points as well. So it's like, is he going to score 21 points in an NBA game? And maybe,
Yeah, and that's a guy that's not a rookie. That's a guy that's, been in the league for about 3 seasons, I think.
Exactly.
I think he was a rookie 2 seasons ago, right? So
Yeah,
this was technically like year 3.
yeah. So like that kind of puts it into perspective in terms of the competition and what these guys are up against. And yeah, the California Classic, I mean, it's a cool thing to watch sometimes, I guess, but at the end of the day, I think everybody's kind of more so looking and getting hyped for the 2K24 Summer League or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Vegas one.
Yeah, which should be interesting. We've kind of talked about this draft class where, not a lot of stars, but I think there's going to be a lot of impact guys, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on this Summer League, regardless, just because of some of the names here. So I'm kind of getting a little bit hyped for that because I am missing basketball a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's going to be, they also have some of those key matchups, right? Where like in terms of like some of the teams and players that are going to be playing against each other, right? So that should also be, kind of something to look forward to, as well, right?
Yeah.
But again, just as a caution, right? Just don't take away a ton from Summer League. Just don't do it, because there have been guys that have had horrible Summer Leagues, that have turned out to be really, really good. And there were guys who were great Summer League players that ended up not being so good. So just putting that out there.
That's how it goes, man.
Yeah, because like we talked about even like a Brandon Miller in Summer League, where he had like a very up and down Summer League performance, just getting clowned online left and right.
It's horrible.
Guess what? He had a terrific rookie season.
Yeah, and you look at Scoot, and it's like, he had some good games.
Yeah.
And then
I think he played in one.
Yeah, he had a good debut, and then the rookie year, a little hot and cold,
Exactly. So that's just kind of a thing just to kind of just keep in mind, right? Like obviously we can discuss those games and mention it, right? And talk about strengths and weaknesses of guys. Like again, like Bronny, he had a rough game. Like there were some positives, right? Where it's like good athlete, right? You can clearly see some of the decision making and athleticism on display, but he still has like some rawness to his game, which we expected, right? Because again, he was a late 2nd round pick. He's going to be in the G League for most of the season, right? This is not a guy that's going to be playing, major minutes for the Lakers this season, unless, like I said before, something goes horribly wrong.
Right. And, like you said, I think we do have to kind of talk about Bronny as well, because, there were things that I liked where I think he plays basketball the right way. He knows how to make the right play. And a lot of his shots were good open shots. It's just they didn't fall. And that's sometimes the way that basketball goes. If you've played and if you've watched, sometimes you see that people have off nights, off days, whatever the case may be. But yeah, if he wants to be successful, he's got to hit those, those gimmies, the wide open shots, because I think that's what's going to make him valuable, is the fact that he has the IQ, he has the tools to be a good defender. But you got to be a serviceable shooter out there, I think, to be successful in today's NBA.
Right. And now we also have Team USA, right, coming up, right? So obviously they'll be taking on, the rest of the world, right, in a quest for the gold in the Summer Olympics, right? We've had a few injuries, right, to kind of monitor, right? So like Kevin Durant, right, he had a minor calf strain, right, to begin, the camp. So he's been held out. So he's day to day. So not considered serious. We'll see what happens there. I think Steph had like a bloodied hand, right, in the scrimmage, right? But apparently that's not like a serious one either. Obviously, we know a couple other guys, had injuries like in the season, right, that they're probably like still nursing and playing through, like a Kawhi or a Joel Embiid. But this team should still be as long as they're healthy, like they should still be really good, because you have a good mix of, like some of the veteran stars, right? As we've mentioned, like a Steph, LeBron, Durant, or others, right? And you also have the other mix, right, of the younger guys, right? Like you have Edwards, you have Tatum. You have like a lot of really good players, right? You got Bam, you got AD. So you have a really good mix of like guys that play different positions, guys that can do a lot of different things. You have depth as well. Like it's just a better roster than a lot of the previous ones. So as long as they're healthy, like they should be able to, win it all. But, of course, I guess we've been surprised before.
Yeah, this is an awesome team. Like if you really just look at the roster, they assembled, the Avengers for this one. And that's kind of what I think everybody was hoping for. Because like you said, recently the rosters haven't been too great, especially in the World Cups. Those have been the ones where it's been very questionable. But when it comes to the Olympics, we don't play. We we don't mess around with this stuff. We kind of like to poke our chest out a little bit because I think we do have the best players in the world that play in this league. And, you know, you look at this roster and you can see it for sure. You can see the influence. What do you make of Anthony Edwards and his comments? If you saw them?
Again, it's pretty in line, I guess, with, you know, what he's established his personality as, right? So, I mean, are they going to run everything through him? Like, probably not. But, you know, he is a guy where, like, I feel like they're still probably going to give him a lot of opportunities.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah,
But,
yeah.
obviously, his biggest strengths is what he's able to do with the ball in his hands as a scorer. So there's not a world where, like, he just goes long stretches without touching the basketball. I just don't necessarily know if they're going to completely run the offense through him.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, I like the comment when I first heard it. I was like, that's pretty confident. I like that, you know, considering who's on this roster surrounding him. You know, what are some other storylines? I guess, you know, Joel Embiid chasing his first gold. That's pretty dope.
Right.
Curry, I think this is his, first tour because of, like, health
Yeah,
previously.
he didn't play in the 2016 one.
Yeah, and then what was the other one? There was one more before that, right, that he was in?
He wasn't in the 2012 one.
Okay.
Because I don't think
He wasn't that
roster.
good. Okay, yeah. But, I mean, it's still, like, you know, I think, like, I swear there was one more. Are you sure there wasn't another one that he was in? Because I feel like there was one where I think he was like, where he was like, I want to, he was like, I didn't want to do it or something because I wanted to focus on the title or something like that.
Right.
Was that what it was?
Think 2016 was the one that he could have played in, but I don't think he was in. He ended up not playing in that one.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's interesting. So, you know, Steph Curry is kind of wild, and Joel Embiid being there for the first time is pretty dope too. So, like I said, roster looks fire. And then obviously the role players, which is crazy to even call these guys role players, but the role players for Team USA are also other guys to watch as well. Like, I feel like Tyrese Halliburton being there is pretty dope. Drew Holiday, I think, is also on the team. So solid squad. God squad, actually.
So, like, ultimately, like, what is the starting lineup?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Because, I mean, we've got LeBron, Curry, and Durant.
Right.
Like, I feel like those three kind of have to start, right?
Right. And then after that, is Edwards the other starting guard?
Ooh, that's interesting. I guess it would have to be him in all reality, huh? Because who else? What other guards do they have? Halliburton and Drew?
Right. Yeah. Halliburton, Brunson, Drew.
I'm from like a system wise, like I would probably go Drew, but like I feel like you have to kind of go Anthony Edwards just because he's able to defend too.
Not Brunson. Booker.
My gosh, bro, we're so stacked. Like we don't even know the starting lineup.
Yeah,
but
my bad. Yeah, not Brunson. Booker.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's between probably Book and Ant-Man.
Right?
Yeah, Book and Ant-Man in reality.
Right.
So.
And then the center, I'm gonna assume is Embiid, right?
Oh yeah, that's a lock. Yeah, he's a lock.
Yeah,
no question.
It's not gonna be Bam.
No.
Probably it's not gonna be AD.
I don't think it would be AD. Yeah.
Right. So that's probably your starting group, and but again, the guys coming off the bench, those are still some really good players. So
the best in the world. So yeah, like you said, it's coming up. I think this is the most hyped I think I've ever been for the Olympics. So I'm really hyped to see this one.
Yeah, because again, it's like we said, it's a great mix of kind of the old and the new, the new, right? So it's like you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, yeah, that's going to be really intriguing to see, that team if they can go all the way, because there's, there are other teams right around, the other countries, right? Obviously, I think they're going to be playing Serbia, right? Not for like the first official game where if you lose, you get eliminated, but it's like one of those like
exhibitions,
I guess exhibition games, right? Obviously, I think Greece was able to get their way in, right? Because they beat a couple of teams, including Luka's Slovenian team, in order to get in there. I think France is the other team that's in there, right? Like, didn't they take out Germany, right? So obviously the French team, right? That's Wemby.
Yeah,
right?
That's the one that scares me. If you want me to be real.
Who's hitting step back threes. So, there should be some formidable teams in there, but I think USA doesn't really have a real reason to lose.
If they lose, I'm done, bro. Like, what can you even say if they actually lose? I don't even want to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. But we'll see. But it's going to be, I think it should be really fun. Like you said, it should be one of the most exciting Team USA teams that we've had in a while.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it might be the most exciting one though all time. And you know, I get it. The Dream Team is very iconic. Even the Redeem Team, the one with Kobe, like that's very iconic as well. But this one is just crazy because, like you said, the generations are clashing and mixing. So pretty dope.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, let us know your thoughts, on these other free agency signings, right? As well as California Classic Summer League, Team USA as well, right? What are your thoughts on the rosters, right? And everything else. Of course, again, we're still going to be doing content over the course of the offseason. We're not going anywhere. So, hopefully we continue to bring in new subscribers. We're almost at our goal of 100 subs, right? About 10 or 11 more as of this video. So hopefully we can continue to reach that. We appreciate all the love and support, and we'll see you in the next episode.